We're learning more tonight about the Boston Marathon bombing, and yet there are still so many questions that have not been answered. The biggest one, of course, is who's behind it. Ben is looking back at some recent history in order to look forward in a reality check you won't see anywhere else.
In what has become the first terror bombing or explosion in the U.S. since 9/11, the biggest question tonight is who is responsible. Tonight we know more about what happened. The explosives used in this deadly Boston Marathon bombing were contained in 1.6-gallon pressure cookers hidden in black duffel bags on the ground. A person briefed on the investigation told that to the Associated Press. Now, one of the explosives contained shards of metal and ball bearings. Another contained nails. Those two bombs blew up about 10 seconds apart Monday, tearing off victims' limbs and leaving the streets spattered with blood and strewn with broken glass. 3 people were killed, including an 8-year-old boy. More than 170 people were wounded. So the big question that has not been answered yet is who is behind these attacks. So far, the FBI has questioned a Saudi national and has searched his apartment but found no signs of evidence against him. No groups have come forward claiming responsibility. And tonight, intelligence officials say they do not believe this was an al-Qaeda plot. So who was behind it? Well, no one knows at this point, or at least no one is saying. The last time the U.S. saw a bombing attempt like this was 1993. It was during the World Trade Center bombing. That explosion left 6 people dead, more than 1,000 injured. Damages in excess of $500 million. But there is a part of the World Trade Center bombings that is severely underreported. That it was the FBI presiding over the terrorists who carried out the 1993 bombing. In fact, virtually no one would know that fact today had it not been for this man, Emad A Salem, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer. He was used by our government to penetrate a circle of Muslim extremists. According to extensive reporting by the New York Times, Mr. Salem secretly recorded hundreds of hours of conversations with the feds. Again, according to the Times, law enforcement officials were told that terrorists were building a bomb that was eventually used to blow up the World Trade Center. They planned to thwart the plotters by secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives. The informer was to have helped the plotters build the bomb and supply the fake powder, but the plan was called off by an FBI supervisor. The account portrays the authorities as in a far better position than previously known to foil the February 26 bombing of New York City's tallest towers. Well, what this means for you, again tonight, we know very little about what happened, but we do know this. The University of Mobile's cross-country coach told a local TV affiliate that he was near the finish line of the Boston Marathon when the explosions went off. He said he thought it was odd that there were bomb-sniffing dogs at both the start and the finish lines. He also said that law enforcement spotters were on the roofs at the start and end of the race. So the question tonight must be asked. Did the FBI have any knowledge of this plot before it happened? We do know for a fact that dozens of times since 9/11, the FBI has recruited, trained, and then taken down suspected terrorists before they could carry out their plots. That's not conspiracy, that's a fact. Is the practice of the FBI creating terror plots only to break them up before they can actually happen really making us safer? Is that what happened here? And that is Reality Check.
Does the government work for us or do we work for the government? Can the federal government take credit for saving us from a plot of its own creation? Tonight, has the federal government kept us safe or does it just want us to think that it has kept us safe? Since the tragedy of 9/11, numerous crazies and low-level copycats have engaged in criminal behavior which they hoped would result in the deaths of innocent Americans and somehow advance their cause of jihad. If you ask the leadership of the FBI, most of whose field agents are tireless, dedicated, Constitution-supporting professionals, it will tell you that the FBI, has foiled about 17 plots to kill Americans during the past 10 years. What it will not tell you is that there have been 20 foiled plots. And of them, 3 were interrupted by members of the public. The 17 that were interrupted by the feds were created by the feds. We all remember the 3 that were foiled by diligent Americans: the shoe bomber, the underwear bomber, and the Times Square bomber. In all of these cases, the crimes charged were those of attempting to kill and conspiring with others to do so. In all 3 of those cases, alert Americans on transcontinental flights or in the streets of New York City told authorities of bizarre behavior or actually subdued the threats themselves. There was no foiling by the FBI. The plotters were, thankfully, bumbling fools who had poorly planned their criminal behavior and who ended up harming no one. All 3 are serving life terms. But the more curious cases are the remaining 17 for which the federal government has taken credit. They all have a common and reprehensible thread. They were planned, plotted, controlled, and carried out by the federal government itself. In all of these 17 cases, from the Fort Dix 6 to the Lackawanna 7 to the Portland parade bomber, the feds found young men of Muslim backgrounds, loners who were bitter at America. They befriended them, cajoled them, and persuaded them that they could change the world by killing Americans. In all these cases, agents worked undercover and portrayed themselves to the targets as Arabs of like un-American mind. In some cases, the federal agents used third parties to act as middlemen. The third parties were typically persons who had been convicted of crimes and who, in return for leniency at their own sentencings, were willing to work with the same feds who prosecuted them in order to help the feds entrap whomever else those feds were pursuing. Thus, in all 17 of these cases, because of the command and control of federal agents, no one was ever in danger, no one was harmed, no bomb went off, and no property was damaged. But in all those cases, the losers whom the feds targeted each believed that they were interacting with real plotters who would bring them cash and bombs. As we know, sometimes the cash arrived, but the bombs never did. The defendants were essentially charged and convicted for playing a game with federal agents. The most recent of those government-generated plots was revealed yesterday. It has a new twist because it allegedly involves agents of the intelligence apparatus of the government of Iran. It, too, was destined to go nowhere, as the feds monitored and taped every move made by their target as he interacted with federal agents whom he stupidly believed to be drug dealers and co-conspirators. Today, the feds themselves revealed that high officials of Iran's government knew nothing of this. Of course, the neocons have demanded bombs on Tehran, no matter what the government there knew. And this plot came to light the day before Attorney General Holder himself was subpoenaed by Congress in the Fast and Furious case. You get the picture. Are any of these plots criminal? Can the government just pick and choose whom to seduce and then lower the boom at the right time and arrest its would-be Confederates? Is this a proper and efficient use of law enforcement resources? The answers to these questions are obvious, and they are not good. The courts have made this legal, so long as the target of these plots had a mental predisposition to cause harm. But none of this keeps us safe. All of this makes us less free, as any one of us can be entrapped. And we are fools if we praise the government for exposing a plot of its own creation and saving us from a danger that never existed. Can the government break the law in order to enforce it? Well, when it does, it becomes a law unto itself, and the rule of law dies as the feds decide whom to target and whom to trap. Think about it. Are we really safe in a false sense of security? Why do we pay the government to trick us into believing it is keeping us safe? When no one is harmed and the government controls the plot, aren't we just punishing someone for his thoughts? And in a free society, aren't free people free to think as they wish? This must be so, because if the government can punish our thoughts, there are no limits to its power. From New York, defending freedom.
Hearing we were having on violence on the border of Mexico.
When were you first told or became knowledgeable about U.S. officials allowing firearms to be sold to the drug cartels in Mexico?
I don't know. You hear some of these quotes. I need a gun to protect myself from the government. If there are any folks who are out there right now who are gun owners, and you've been hearing that somehow if somebody's taking away your guns, get the facts. We're not proposing a gun registration system. We're proposing background checks for criminals.
Congress has repeatedly outlawed gun registration because of the accurate recognition that in other countries and in the United States, in New York City, gun registration has been used as a tool for confiscation.
Sandy Hook Elementary and the awful
Well, there's just too many guns in the world.
What can we do? Should we write
You can, around this country, you call your congressman and your senator.
In the spirit of gun control, will you disarm your entire security team?
We'll get right back to you.
You'll get back to me?
I told my wife, I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts.
You sit on your balcony with your firearm. That's called If I do what the Vice President advises me to do, I'll go to jail.
What are things that maybe really upset me, and how do I respond to that? Do I grab my gun to go shoot somebody because I'm upset about something?
There appeared to be a brief struggle. Then, a 2-year veteran BART officer stands, draws his weapon, and fires.
I recognize it's an uphill battle, but I also know that these events are going to continue.
The biggest event in my close to 18 years on air happened today. Paul Watson, one of my best researchers, was about to come on as a guest, and he said, Alex, they have these big sites with data dumps of photos and news feeds. There are guys in uniforms, the same boots, the same pants, the same black shirts and coats, with backpacks all over the last mile. And there's people walking around with what looks like detonators in their hands. And all this is going on, and then there's like patsies whose bags match the wreckage of what the news put on air and said was the remains of the black canvas bags.
This be a drill.
They won't tell us exactly what they were doing here, only that they were doing a training exercise.
If you didn't know better, you'd have thought yesterday that something at the old Carnegie Vanguard School was horribly wrong. Unmarked helicopters flying low, men in camouflage with guns, and gunfire, or what sounded like it, eyewitnesses say, lots of gunfire.
Yeah, Dave, it was frightening for sure, and to some at nearby Roberts Elementary, so unexpected that the school was locked down for a short time until everyone realized it was a drill. With military helicopters flying above her southeast Houston neighborhood,